And so you can play with the sliders and see, right, what happens now if b is not 0. Oh, okay. It just changes, right, that line, because then it becomes x minus or x, minus a negative 5 6/10 or x plus 5 6/10, right? So it moved my line, but my whole will still be at, in this case, right, x equals 4 if a is 4. And I'm going to put that back to 0 for 1 minute. And then, and also if we move it down here to the negatives, I'll do -5, right? If I'm here at -5, right, there we go, right? So that's going to be where my point discontinuity is, because we have this, right, factor in the numerator, factor in the denominator. What I want to show you here, and I'm going to change this one. All right, so I'm going to do x minus e, x minus a. What if the 2 factors were in the denominator and the 1 factor was in the numerator? How does that, instead of, right, a and b in the numerator and just a in the denominator? So let's turn this one off. Let's turn this one back on. And yes, this is what I want you to see, right? And let's here. Right now I'm going to plug in, we have the equation y equals x plus 5 divided by x plus 5 times x, right? Our b is just 0. So this is where we see these can divide out, right? So they do not create this vertical asymptote, but this one, x does not divide out. So therefore, we do have this, right, vertical asymptote at x equals 0. And so even though that these do divide out, right, we can simplify this equation to be y equals 1 over x. But again, x cannot equal, what would make this denominator 0? Yep, -5, right? And so we see that we have both of these different types. We have the point, right, the hole in the graph, and the vertical asymptote. So x cannot equal -5. So even though we would simplify it, we still need to have this stipulation, this condition for this factor in the denominator, even though we factored it out. Now, say that a was not in the numerator. Maybe just say that this is 6. Oops, let me clear everything. Right. And so now if this is a is, right, so here we have y equals x minus 6 divided by x plus 5 times x, right? Because now these two do not factor out, right? They don't divide out. And I know maybe would think they don't cancel out, right? They're not the same factor. We now still have, right, these two factors in the denominator that would make 2 factors to make the denominator equal to 0, right? At x equals -5 and x equals 0. And so how do they show up? Yep, you guessed it, right? As vertical asymptotes at x equals -5 and x equals 0. So what a lot of ALEKS work this week is going to be showing you these rational functions, not in factored form. They're going to ask you to factor them. And then that way you can find these vertical asymptotes, or even if they divide, they divide out in these cases to show the whole. And so if they divide out, you name it as a whole. If they don't divide out, then it's a vertical asymptote. And that's how you can tell the difference. So if the factors divide out, it becomes a whole. If they don't divide out, it becomes, right, and it's equal to 0 in the denominator, then it's a vertical asymptote. And we'll clear this, and I'll do one last, maybe we'll even turn this off. Y equals, and it can, same thing, be anything in the numerator. I'll just leave it as 1 just for simplicity's sake, but it can have more than 1, maybe x minus 3, x plus 4. And then what if we added another one, x minus 1? Yep, Exactly. So just like the linear factors kind of work for the zeros, is exactly how, if these are all zeros in the denominator, they will then, and do not divide with anything in the numerator, right? They will all be these vertical asymptotes, these points of discontinuity. And so you can see how they change the graph and how they work with that. So play with Desmos. Play with the sliders if that's helpful. If it's not helpful, make up your own equations and see what the graphs look like. And so our new learning here is these two ways to find these discontinuity, right? These points of discontinuity. And both of them are going to be when the denominator, right? For a vertical asymptote, it's when the denominator equals 0. If there's no factor to divide with in the numerator, then they create these vertical asymptotes. If it does divide out with something in the numerator, then it still is discontinuous, but it just creates that hole. It looks like it goes away, but it doesn't actually go away. It creates that hole in the graph.